Hi Nick, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. Feels really weird to talk to you today because Peter, who you play, passed away not
hmm
just yesterday.
That's
And so
right.
for you, how was it at the time of filming this? Obviously, he was still living, uh, playing a role of a musician who does have such a kind of legacy in pop culture, but also was alive still when you guys were working on this film.
Your question was how was that?
Yeah, like how was the experience of like you're honoring someone who's still alive in that way?
Yeah, well, it was certainly an honor to play somebody who was so influential on the music scene, folk music in general. Um, yeah, it was. I've played a few real people now on TV and film, and it's a bit stressful just the idea of having to honor them in the way that you're playing them as truthfully as possible. And that was really the goal was to just do as much research as I could. And he invited me to his home before we actually started filming, so I got to go sit with him for about an hour and have a conversation about his life and try to compress that into just an hour's conversation. But um, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of pressure because you want to make sure that, if they were to see the movie, that they feel like you really put in the effort, that you kind of didn't phone it in. So that was kind of my goal.
Yeah, well, and I wanted to ask because now you were in The Offer, which is also
hmm
a book that they about the creation of a movie that they turned into a television series. Well, and this is a book about a time that people really like a lot of people found their love of Bob Dylan through this time. What is the
hmm
difference for you as an actor of like getting a book and looking at these people as like, okay, these are characters I'm playing versus, you know, something I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this. Like they're
hmm
both adaptations of books about real events that people know, but I do feel like the A Complete Unknown story is a little bit more well known than say the creation of The Godfather and how that all came to be. So was
hmm
there like a difference when you were approaching characters between these two projects since they are based on real people?
Yeah, well, the kind of research I did for John Cazale was just watching all of his movies and reading everything that I could about him. There was a book about him, a short one. And there was just a lot of interviews from, Pacino and De Niro and Meryl Streep and all these people that were informative and but they're he had a pretty short career as a famous person, so that one I had to just use the five films that he was in, which were are all incredible films, all Oscar nominated films. But that's what I had to go off of with him. And the book, or just reading about the making of The Godfather was helpful, but for my scenes that I had in that show, it was very much just I knew what I had to do, which was like focus on getting him right, his personality, his antics, and his relationships with everybody at the dinner table scene that we did. And yeah, so but for this one, I think it was more about the grand scope of the whole event and the time and the politics and the kinds of like passions that were floating around with these people, and the relationships between him and Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and Sylvie Russo, they called her in this movie. All there was just a lot more to take in. So it was about reading the book. It was about, I watched a DVD that Peter Yarrow gave me with some interviews of him, and it was just, but it was all the reading of the Dylan Goes Electric and watching the Scorsese doc and reading Chronicles and just trying to understand him as a person. It was more focusing on not just me and or just not just Peter Yarrow, but focusing really hard on Bob Dylan because going into that you want to understand him as much as possible.
Yeah. When I do love this movie, one of my favorite parts is I love Bob Dylan very much. I've loved him my entire life, but I love
Yeah, me too.
that he is a person who refuses to do what people tell him to do. Like if
Hmm.
you go to his concert, he's not singing what you want him to sing. And I like that the movie kind of reflects that. But what I really
Yeah.
love is essentially throughout that whole movie, he has told everybody, like when they say he's a folk musician, he's like, no, I'm a musician. And he's pushed that narrative.
Hmm.
When you guys were working on those, the folk scene in that time period, and when Dylan was both at the height of it, and then when he kind of destroyed it with going electric, how for you what fun was it to kind of see that come to life through Mangold's view, because he does it so well, but it is something that most of us have only ever heard about because we weren't alive at the time, or we just kind of have hindsight when you're looking at it.
Right. Yeah. There's just some video footage, and
Yeah.
we don't even have all the video footage, which is something I found, going into the movie was I got to see a couple more clips of things that were just not released, which is very, very exciting. But I'm the same way. I was a huge fan of him growing up. Since I was like 14, I think I started listening to his music, and then I just wanted to play guitar and play harmonica and be just like him. So I watched the Scorsese documentary when it came out. I watched, Don't Look Back and everything that I could find on YouTube about him. And so I knew this time intimately just from having been obsessed on my own. And so it was cool to not only see that brought to life and incredibly surreal, but also to be with a bunch of people who are genuinely thrilled to be recreating this whole scene. And Mangold shot that last concert, Dylan's entire set. He shot it all in one take. So it was very, very cool for us to, he had multiple cameras going, but it was very cool to see the entire concert, because it really made everybody feel totally invested and totally engrossed in this world. So yeah, I mean, it was just bizarre to see that. And then eventually you have to start kind of you have to start doing the work of being present after you do the take 10, 15 times, because you're like, okay, now this is starting to seem not real. You know what I mean? It starts to just play over and over, and you're like, this isn't how it actually happened. You know what I mean? So that's when you have to really. So at first, it's actually easier, but yeah, I think sometimes acting is weird like that.
Yeah. I was a theater major, so I 100% understand. But
Yeah, yeah.
I do want to ask, because when I talked to the production designer, we talked, my favorite album cover of all time is Free Will and Bob Dylan, where it's him and in this movie, Sylvie Russo, walking
Hmm.
down the street together. And he said that they recreated that using both Timmy and Elle Fanning, and that they did that a lot with album covers or whatever you see. They would make sure it was Monica Barbaro or Boyd Holbrook or whoever it was,
Right, right.
actual album. What for you was the most kind of exciting thing to see recreated on these sets and like see brought to life through this version of Bob Dylan's story?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm with you. The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan is such an exciting album, and it's a lot of people's favorite thing that he ever did. And seeing that recreated was really cool. I think it was like, oh, you know what it was is the Gaslight. I think it was
Mm.
really cool seeing the Gaslight because I used to have there's a album of Dylan's. I think it's just called Live at the Gaslight or something where he plays Hard Rain is Gonna Fall and all these old folk songs, and I just I always try to picture that place. So that was really cool to see him recreate that. But on top of that, yeah, I mean, I think just going back to the Dylan Goes Electric, the moment that whole thing was like I had watched that concert so many times. So just seeing that, or just him playing at the Newport Folk Festival in general, was really, really cool.
Yeah,
It's such a crazy cool movie to be a part of.
well, yeah, and when I did my interviews during the regular junket, I had my Bob Dylan poster there, but that's inside Llewyn Davis, which I also
Yeah,
love because it ends with Bob Dylan coming to the Gaslight and Llewyn Davis basically being usurped by Bob Dylan.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It,
I love
what
that.
what my
That
favorite
was an incredible scene, by the way.
oh, it's so
Him
good.
walking out while Dylan is playing, and they're just playing like the real Dylan in the background and show the silhouette. I was like, that it's just so breathtaking.
Well, now I can believe that this movie is just the follow up of Inside Llewyn Davis because you don't
Yeah.
actually see who Dylan is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well
totally.
done.
Yeah.
Um, One thing I do love that this movie does too is obviously we again in hindsight know like a Rolling Stone is one of the most well-known Bob Dylan songs of all time. But it is
Right.
so funny to kind of see all these folk musicians and folk fans kind of rebuke like a Rolling Stone in real time. You talked a bit about, the filming process and how he did that set and everything, but how was it kind of getting to shut off that part of your brain throughout a lot of this movie and know what success was to come to just kind of, wail on a song that's electric and not folk in the moment.
Yeah, well that that whole scene was really cool to be a part of, and we had all done we'd all done our own research and our own work to make sure that like we knew where our characters stood in terms of like, is it right or is it wrong that he's going electric at this folk festival? um for Peter Yarrow, from our conversation, he said that Dylan always viewed Yarrow as the intermediary between him and the board. And and they do a good job in the movie of Peter is kind of on the fence. He's not exactly one side or the other. And when I talked to him, he said that he thought Dylan could do whatever he wanted. But at the same time, he was like, I did tell Dylan to, maybe but before you start, maybe say like, hey, I'm going to play a few of these, songs, and then I'm going to play some new things that I've been working on. And, you know, Dylan obviously doesn't like to do what anyone thinks he should do. Um, and something that I found was really interesting was, was Peter actually said that concert was kind of the thing that ruined his relationship with Dylan, because Dylan never forgave him for not standing up for him more. And so playing that scene for me personally was I kept all those things in mind. Like this whole idea of like everything's going wrong. Dylan's doing what the board wanted him not to do, explicitly told him, please don't do. And I'm kind of stuck in the middle of this. And I know that I have to go out. If he's going to walk off stage, I know I have to go out and I have to say something. And there's, the real moment that happened with Peter was he walked out on stage and for a minute and a half had to stall with the audience, that was screaming for Dylan to come back out. So yeah, it was, but I love that I love what Dylan did, but I also understand the feeling of like, hey man, maybe have like a little more respect for this festival, bit of a
Mhm.
complicated situation.
Yeah. Well, I have two more questions. One is I love how New York this movie is because as a New Yorker watching it and seeing, Josh Henry and then Norbert Leo Butz and like being a Broadway fan
Yeah.
on top of it
Yeah.
all, I was just like, this is the greatest day of my life. All my faves are just now in a Bob Dylan movie.
Yeah. Have you talked to Norbert? Did you get a chance
No,
to talk to him? Oh,
and
he's the
I
best.
love Norbert Leo Butz because I love Last 5 Years and Wicked and all that stuff. But
Yeah, he's awesome.
it is, I love that helps, me as a New Yorker when things are not filmed in New York or whatever it is, really kind of relate to it. Cause I'm like, oh, okay, well, these are like people I know and see in New York City, and they are actually New Yorkers. How
Yeah.
was it for you guys, filming? I know you guys filmed in Jersey and around New York as well. How was it kind of having that to work with in this movie and be in these places and kind of know like, okay, well, these musicians all were here at this time, or they knew this place as well as anybody else, and I now have to like embody that.
I think that there was no other place that this movie could have been filmed.
Mhm.
And I was so excited that, first of all, I just had to take a short train ride into Jersey, or hop on the transpo bus from the city into Jersey, which is always a lovely thing for an actor to not have to leave their home, for weeks and weeks or months at a time. But it was that I think it was absolutely essential that it be shot in the city and outside, outside of the city in Jersey, to because a lot of the old, a lot of Jersey has these old neighborhoods that really look like old New York. Um, but yeah, I think it was very surreal. I'm my family's from New York. I didn't grow up here, but I've been here for, 5, 6 years, and I've always wanted to live here, and I love New York so deeply. Um, so to shoot a movie that was about one of my, biggest heroes of all time, and in my favorite city in the world was, um, I think it was perfect, and I'm the same way. I love to see real New York actors be in a movie that is about New York, that is in New York. It was just very, very special. I mean, seeing Edward Norton, act in this film. I mean, it was everything just kind of felt like it was coming together for a brief moment in time. Yeah. So that I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. And for my last question, I just want to ask you because you're also a Dylan fan. One of my favorite movies of all time is I'm Not There because I like
Mm,
how they approach all of Dylan's kind of eras, as it were. Especially like I
yeah.
love when he finds religion because I think Pressing On is one of his best songs.
Yeah,
But
totally.
for you, what when now that you're in a movie about Bob Dylan and you're also a Dylan fan, is there an era of Dylan's career that you're like, well, now that we've done a complete unknown, we could also just go dive in more in depth into this portion of his life?
Yeah, I would love to. I think that the era that he did go religious is really interesting. What was it? The other documentary, the Sound of Thunder, or
Oh yeah, I forget what it's
the
called though.
yeah, something Thunder. That era would be really cool. I really love like the Blood on the Tracks album, and um, I don't know. I liked when he started wearing earrings and stuff, and all these like crazy hats, and so yeah, I think like that. I mean, it used to be this era, and it is. I mean, I think it's so cool. It still is like my favorite, maybe, but he was also such like a young, arrogant
Hmm.
little kid, who was like unbelievable at songwriting and just speaking. He was such like so ahead of his time. But yeah, I don't know. I think just like in his 30s, I think he started to mature a little bit. I'd like to see kind of those albums like Blood on the Tracks, and yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. I really appreciate it. I love A Complete Unknown a lot. I know I am biased, but I
sure.
really enjoy. I think it's a perfect biopic for Dylan. I love it very
I
much.
think I think they really knocked it out of the park too. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. That's awesome.
Well, thank you so much and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.